Welcome to Roll Credits, where we dive into the trivia, production secrets, and stories behind your favorite films. This podcast was created with the help of AI tools, and while we aim to keep everything fun and accurate, the occasional error or outdated detail might slip through, so if you're quoting us at the bar after beach volleyball, double check and enjoy the show.
That's right.
Today, we're buzzing the tower with Top Gun 1986 and its long-awaited sequel, Top Gun Maverick 2022.
Yeah, gonna feel the need for facts.
Exactly. From Tom Cruise's fearless flight deck antics to the evolution of real jet stunt work, we've got trivia, soundtrack lore, and a few G-Force level surprises lined up.
Absolutely. And what we're doing today, just so you know, is a deep dive. We've got this great collection of sources from a listener who's really into these two films, super curious about, the history, how they actually made them, the impact they had. All that stuff.
That's right. We're not just scratching the surface here. We're taking all this material, articles, bits of research, notes, and really digging in. We're pulling out the most interesting bits, the stuff that makes you go, wow, the insights that help you understand why these movies, why they still hit so hard, even decades apart.
Right. Think of us as your RIOs for this information overload. We're navigating the data so you get the important takeaways without, wading through everything yourself.
Perfect analogy. So settle in, maybe grab that drink. Just maybe hold off on the high G maneuver as well listening.
Good advice.
Yeah.
We're going to cover it all, starting right back at the beginning with the original, the one that started it all.
Okay, let's do it. Part 1, The Legend. 1986, Top Gun. The movie that basically made fighter pilots the coolest thing on the planet.
And power ballads. Don't forget the power ballads.
Can't forget those. So the basic story, if anyone listening somehow missed it, which seems unlikely, but hey.
You never know.
It follows Pete Maverick Mitchell, that's Tom Cruise, obviously, and his RIO, his radar intercept officer, Nick Goose Bradshaw, played by Anthony Edwards.
Right. And these guys are good, like really good pilots.
Yeah.
But they're also, they bend the rules a lot.
They're hot shots, total hot shots. And they managed to get into the U.S. Navy's elite fighter weapons school, the place everyone just calls TOPG,
Which back then, in '86, was based at Naval Air Station Miramar in California. Fighter Town, USA, they called it.
And getting into TOPG it's not just like another training course. It's intense. It's a pressure cooker.
Totally. The film throws you right into that. It's this high-stakes environment where everyone's competing, not just learning from the instructors, but competing against each other to be the best.
And Maverick's biggest rival, Tom Iceman Kazansky, Val Kilmer, just perfectly cool and calculated, the polar opposite of Maverick in many ways.
Exactly. So you watch them go through this insane training, pushing the F-14s, pushing themselves to the absolute limit. And there's drama, there's loss.
Yeah.
It's all about surviving that pressure cooker and, figuring out what it really means to be the best.
It really is that journey through the school. Now, getting Top Gun made, especially those aerial scenes, that was a whole other challenge back in the mid-'80s. Oh, yeah. Because think about it, CGI wasn't really a thing then. Not for creating realistic dogfights anyway. So, the director, Tony Scott, and the producers, Don Simpson and Jerry Bruckheimer, they were absolutely set on making it look real. Visceral.
Which meant they needed the Navy. Big time.
Yeah.
And our sources really dig into just how deep that collaboration went. It wasn't just, hey, can we film near your base?
No, not at all. Paramount Pictures basically struck a deal with the Pentagon. A pretty significant one.
How significant?
Well, the number in the sources is $1.8 million. That's 1980s money, remember?
Wow. Okay.
And that bought them access to a lot. Filming at NAS Miramar using four active aircraft carriers.
4 carriers. Seriously.
Yep. Plus access to something like 24 actual military planes, your F-14 Tomcats, obviously, but also the Northrop F-5s. Those played the enemy MiGs.
Ah, right.
And the Douglas A-4 Skyhawks, which the TOPGUN instructors flew in the movie.
And it wasn't just the hardware, was it? They used real pilots, too. Exactly. The sources confirmed that actual active-duty naval aviators were flying those jets for many of the shots, especially the complex maneuvers or the ones filmed from a distance.
Did they get anything extra for doing movie work?
A little bit. An extra $23 a day, apparently. A per diem on top of their Navy pay.
$23 for flying multi-million-dollar jets for Hollywood. Times have changed, huh?
You could say that, but it was crucial for that authenticity. But even beyond that initial $1.8 million fee, just operating those jets for filming, the costs were astronomical.
Yeah, I saw those numbers. It puts things in perspective. The F-14s, the stars of the show, What was it per hour?
$700-800 per hour. That's when they were flown specifically for the film outside of their normal duties.
$7,800 in 1986 money. Adjust that for inflation.
It's nearly $20,000 an hour in today's money. Just think about that. 20 grand every hour those Tomcats were in the air just for the movie cameras.
That's insane. And wasn't there that story about Tony Scott and the aircraft carrier?
Oh, the famous one. Yes. So Tony Scott, the director, he needed a specific shot. He needed the carrier sailing into the sun, that perfect magic hour light.
Right.
But the captain had slightly altered the ship's course, and light wasn't right anymore. Scott needed the ship turned back.
Okay, so he just asks, right?
Well, yeah. He radios the captain, asks him to turn this massive warship around for just a few minutes.
And the captain says...
Captain basically says, sure, that'll be $25,000.
What? To turn the ship?
Yep, $25,000 to maneuver the carrier and hold that position for the 5 minutes Scott needed to get his shot with the perfect light.
And Scott paid it.
According to the story, right then and there, pulled out his own checkbook, wrote a check for $25K, and had it flown up to the bridge by helicopter.
Out of his own pocket.
That's the legend. And $25,000 back then is like, what, $63,000 today?
Yeah.
Just for 5 minutes of filming?
That's commitment. Or maybe obsession, but it shows how badly they wanted those visuals.
It really does. They were absolutely dedicated to capturing that realism. And since CGI wasn't an option, they had to get creative with how they filmed those fast-moving jets.
Right. Grumman helped with that, didn't they? The company that made the F-14.
Yeah, they were key. They designed and built these special camera mounts, but not for an F-14, interestingly. They put them on an A6 Intruder.
Why an A6?
It was slower, more stable, made for a better camera platform flying alongside the faster jets. And these rounds, they allowed cameras in all sorts of positions.
Like where?
Sources say looking forward from the cockpit, under the belly, under the wing, facing forward or backward, even way up high in the tail looking down. That gave them the dynamic angles they needed for the dogfights.
Pretty ingenious. And it wasn't all filmed over the ocean, right? It's some land-based stuff, too.
Yeah, a lot of the ground-based flying, like the training sequences you see early on, that was filmed at Naval Air Station Fallon out in Nevada.
Isn't that where the real TOPGUN school moved later?
It is. Moved there in '96. So kind of fitting they used it even back in the original film.
Now, maybe the biggest challenge. Getting the actors in the jets. Those cockpit shots where you see their faces distorting under the G-force.
That wasn't acting. Well, the reacting was real. They actually put the actors through flight training.
Not just simulator stuff, right? Real flying.
Oh, yeah. Real rigorous flight training. The sources describe it as pretty intense, getting them ready to be passengers during actual high-G maneuvers in the jets.
And the story goes, most of them didn't handle it too well.
That's the widely reported story, yeah. Apparently, everyone in the main cast who went up, except Anthony Edwards, who played Goose.
The RIO.
Right. Everyone except him supposedly threw up at some point during the flights. Val Kilmer even wrote about it, saying he was pretty proud he didn't lose his lunch, given how rough the flights were.
Huh. So when you see Maverick and Iceman grimacing in the cockpit...
They were likely genuinely feeling it. That adds a whole layer of realism, doesn't it?
It really does. That's incredible dedication from the cast. Okay, let's shift gears a bit, talk about some casting stories, the what-ifs.
Always fun. And Top Gun had some big ones, like Tom Cruise. He wasn't a lock for Maverick initially. Or rather, he wasn't convinced he wanted to do it.
Really? Seems like the perfect role for him.
You'd think. But Jerry Bruckheimer and Don Simpson, the producers, they really had to sell him on it.
And how did they do that? What was the hook?
The legendary Blue Angels ride. Bruckheimer arranged for Cruise to go up with the Navy's flight demonstration team. Give him a real taste of what it's like.
Did it work?
Oh, it worked. Apparently, the flight absolutely wrecked him physically. G-forces, maneuvers. The sources mention him getting sick in the plane.
Oof. Doesn't sound like a great sales pitch.
You'd think. But the moment he was back on the ground, something just clicked. The story goes he ran to the nearest payphone.
Payphone. Right, it was 86.
Called Bruckheimer and just said, I'm in. I'm doing the movie. I love it. This is great. So, yeah, puking in a high-performance jet sealed the deal.
Only Tom Cruise. Okay, what about Iceman? Val Kilmer. Was he always the guy?
Almost wasn't. Kilmer apparently wasn't keen on playing Iceman at first. Sources say he actually wanted to pass on the role.
Why? It's such an iconic part.
It seems it might have been contractual. Some reports suggest he was kind of obligated to Paramount to take it. Hard to imagine anyone else delivering that "you can be my wingman" line now, though.
No kidding. It totally worked out. But not everyone signed on, right? Didn't someone turn it down?
Yeah, Matthew Modine. He was pretty big then, Full Metal Jacket and all that. He reportedly turned down a role.
Any reason given?
Sources say it was down to disagreements with the film's politics or the perceived message. He mentioned it in interviews later. Shows you that even back then, people had different takes on the film's tone.
Interesting. And Tony Scott wasn't the only director choice either?
Nope. Before they landed on Scott, the producers apparently considered some unexpected names.
Like who?
John Carpenter, Halloween, The Thing,
Yeah.
and David Cronenberg.
Cronenberg, the body horror guy. Wow, a Cronenberg Top Gun.
Would have been different. Maybe more focus on what G-forces really do to you.
Who knows? Yeah, maybe best we got Tony Scott's vision instead. Okay, so you have Maverick and Iceman, this huge rivalry on screen. Was there any of that off-screen between Cruise and Kilmer?
The report suggests there was, yeah. Maybe not outright hostility, but definitely a distance. They didn't really hang out off set.
Method acting, maybe?
Kilmer actually said that later. In his documentary, Val, he mentioned it was one of his first times really using method acting. He deliberately played up the rivalry off-screen to make it feel more real on-screen.
Did it work?
He thought so. Kilmer said it kind of split the cast into two camps, Team Cruise and Team Kilmer. And that tension, well, you can definitely feel it between Maverick and Iceman in the movie.
Makes sense. And speaking of genuine moments, wasn't there that ad-libbed line from Kilmer? The bullshit cough?
Ah, yes. The classic locker room scene. Maverick's bragging about doing that inverted dive and flipping off the MiG pilot.
Which is totally against the rules, of course.
Totally. And as Maverick's telling the story, Iceman just lets out this dry little cough that sounds exactly like him muttering bullshit under his breath.
And that wasn't scripted.
Nope. Pure Val Kilmer ad-lib, according to the sources. And the reactions you see from the other actors, like Anthony Edwards as Goose, looking surprised or amused, those were apparently genuine reactions to Kilmer going off script.
That's great. Shows you the actors were really living in those moments. Didn't Anthony Edwards say the script was pretty basic?
Yeah, he's quoted saying it was skeletal. Just the bare bones, leaving lots of room for them to improvise and build the characters and dialogue themselves. That cough is a perfect example.
So cool. Here's another piece of trivia I found fascinating. One of the actual F-14 pilots doing stunts in the movie became an astronaut.
That's right, Scott Altman. He was an active-duty Navy pilot based at Miramar when they were filming.
And he did some key flying, didn't he?
He did. Sources report he was the pilot who actually flew the F-14 in that opening scene, the one where it flips upside down right over the MiG. That iconic bird flip.
No.
And apparently he was also the pilot who flew the F-14 that buzzed the tower later in the film.
That's amazing. From buzzing the tower in Top Gun to commanding the space shuttle. Talk about a career path.
Seriously, 4 shuttle missions, commanded 2 of them. Pretty incredible legacy.
Okay, let's talk about the film's impact once it hit theaters. It was huge.
Oh, absolutely massive. It was the highest grossing film of 1986, made $180 million worldwide, which on a $15 million budget, that's a monster hit.
And it basically made Tom Cruise the global superstar.
Undeniably. It launched him into a whole different stratosphere. But beyond the box office, there's that whole famous connection to Navy recruitment.
Ah, yes, the 500% increase myth.
Exactly. That number gets thrown around all the time. Top Gun boosted Navy recruitment by 500%. But the sources are pretty clear. That's not accurate.
So what's the real story? Did it have any impact?
It definitely did. It raised the profile of naval aviation massively, got people interested. But the actual measurable bump in recruitment, much smaller.
How much smaller?
Sources citing fact checks say it was probably closer to an 8% increase, which is still significant, just not that, mythical 500%.
8% is still pretty good for a movie's influence. Did the Navy try to capitalize on it?
Oh, for sure. They were very aware of the film's potential as a marketing tool. There are quotes from recruiting officers back in '86 saying they were hearing fewer no's after the movie came out.
Ah.
And they literally set up recruitment booths in the lobbies of movie theaters showing Top Gun.
Seriously, you're right outside the theater.
Yep. The idea was, and this is a quote, to catch those adrenaline-charged guys walking out, still buzzing for the movie, and maybe get them thinking about signing up.
Wow. That's pretty direct marketing.
It is. Though it's important to add, as the sources point out, the Navy doesn't actually track why people enlist in that way. They don't ask recruits, hey, did you see Top Gun? So there's no official data proving the film caused X number of enlistments. It's more correlation and anecdotal evidence.
Gotcha. Now, the sources also mentioned something a bit more complicated, a more sensitive side to the film's legacy.
Yes, and this is something we need to be careful just to report what the sources say without adding our own judgment.
Okay.
It relates to the tail look scandal, which happened a few years later, in 1991. It was a major incident involving allegations of sexual assault at a Navy aviators convention.
Right, I remember that. What's the connection to Top Gun?
Well, according to the sources we looked at, some investigators and officers involved in the Talic investigation later suggested that themes or attitudes portrayed in Top Gun might have inadvertently contributed to the culture that led to the scandal.
How so?
The perspective presented in these sources is that the movie maybe fueled misconceptions for some younger officers about, acceptable behavior or the kind of rock star attitude associated with fighter pilots.
Hmm.
And also that the film's massive popularity helped to glorify naval pilots in the public eye, potentially creating an environment that, well, faced serious scrutiny later on.
Okay, so just to be crystal clear for everyone listening, we're relaying what's in the source material here. These are claims or perspectives attributed to people involved in the investigation, not our own analysis or endorsement.
Exactly. It's a controversial point raised in the sources about the film's potential ripple effects beyond just the recruitment numbers and pop culture fame.
Understood. But regardless of all that, the film's cultural footprint is undeniable. It really captured something about the 80s.
Absolutely. And proof of that is its selection for the National Film Registry in 2015.
Which means?
It means the Library of Congress deemed it culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant, basically recognizing it as an important piece of American film history that needs to be preserved. That's a big deal.
Definitely. And you cannot talk about Top Gun's legacy without talking about the soundtrack.
Oh man, the soundtrack. It's almost as iconic as the movie itself, maybe even more so for some people.
It's just wall-to-wall 80s perfection. You've got Kenny Loggins with Danger Zone and Playing with the Boys.
Berlin's Take My Breath Away, which is everywhere, Loverboy's Heaven in Your Eyes. And that theme, the Top Gun anthem by Harold Faltermeyer and Steve Stevens, instantly recognizable.
The album was huge, right? #1 on the chart.
Yep, Billboard #1. And they've re-released it tons of times over the years, expanded editions, all that. Rolling Stone even put it on their list of the 101 greatest soundtracks ever just recently.
High praise indeed. Now, the story behind Danger Zone, Kenny Loggins wasn't the first choice, was he?
Not even close.
Yeah.
It's kind of a wild ride through 80s rock. The sources say it was originally meant for Toto.
Toto. Africa Toto?
The very same. But apparently there were legal issues, so they couldn't do it. Then they went to Bryan Adams.
Okay, that makes sense. Rock anthem vibe.
But Adams turned it down flat. Famously said he thought the movie glorified war and didn't want his music attached to it.
Wow. Okay, who was next?
REO Speedwagon. But they backed out because they weren't allowed to write their own songs for the soundtrack.
Yeah.
And then Corey Hart, Sunglasses at Night. He also passed, apparently for the same reason, wanted to perform his own songs. So after all that, then they got to Kenny Loggins.
And he nailed it. Thank goodness. What about Take My Breath Away? That song was massive, won the Oscar.
Huge, global smash, Oscar, Golden Globe. But the story behind it, especially from the band Berlin's perspective, is really interesting and kind of complicated.
How so? It's their song, isn't it?
Well, yes and no. The sources, including interviews with Berlin's John Crawford, make it clear. The band members themselves didn't write the song.
Really? Who did?
Giorgio Moroder, the legendary producer who was overseeing the soundtrack, and a lyricist named Tom Whitlock. They wrote it.
So how did Berlin get involved?
Moroder originally just hired Terry Nunn, Berlin's singer, to sing the demo track. Just a guide vocal, basically.
Okay.
But he loved her performance on the demo so much, he decided to use that version in the actual movie.
Whoa. So the rest of the band didn't play on it?
Nope. Which caused a big headache with Berlin's record label, Geffen. Geffen desperately wanted this massive hit song on Berlin's next album, even though the band hadn't really participated in creating it.
That must have been awkward for the band.
Especially for John Crawford, who was the main songwriter for Berlin. He's been really open about how tough that was. Imagine your band's biggest hit, the song everyone knows you for, is one you had nothing to do with writing or playing.
Yeah, that would sting.
He admitted it really hurt his ego as a songwriter. He felt kind of like a failure, even though the band was having this huge success. Said he reacted badly at the time, sometimes dissing the song because he felt defensive.
That's really honest.
Yeah, he contrasts it with songs he did write. Like, his favorite Berlin song is apparently some cheap demo they did called Hideaway that just had magic. And what he hates is called Sex Me, Talk Me, which cost a fortune to make with session musicians, but in his words, totally sucks.
Wow. That gives you some real insight into the weirdness of the music business. The hits aren't always the ones the artists love, huh?
Not at all. It shows how unpredictable it is. And it's a fascinating backstory to such an iconic song.
Were there other songs that almost made the soundtrack?
A few mentioned in the sources. Toto apparently had another song, Only You, lined up as the love theme before Take My Breath Away. The Motels were also considered for the ballad spot.
Any rock bands?
Judas Priest. They had a song called Reckless, ready to go, but backed out over contract stuff. ABC saw the movie and weren't impressed, so they passed. And Rat apparently turned down using their song Reach for the Sky because they worried their metal fans would call them sellouts.
Ha ha ha. Different times. Even the Cars had a song, Stranger Eyes, in an early trailer, but it didn't make the final cut.
Yeah, it's amazing how many moving parts go into creating that perfect soundtrack mix. So many potential paths not taken.
Okay, incredible stuff on the original. Let's fast forward. Hit the afterburners, jump ahead 36 years. 2022, Top Gun, Maverick.
The Return. And amazingly, Pete Maverick Mitchell. He's still just a captain.
Still dodging promotions after all these years, still pushing limits as a test pilot.
But circumstances force him back to Tauto PGN. Not as a student this time, obviously. He's brought back to be an instructor.
And not just any instructor job. He has to train this elite group of recent TOPGUN grads, the best of the best, for this incredibly dangerous, almost suicidal mission.
Right. And the emotional core of it, really, is Maverick having to confront Goose's son. L.T. Bradley Bradshaw, call sign, Rooster, played by Miles Teller.
That dynamic. It's everything. Maverick having to deal with Rooster, deal with his own guilt over Goose's death all those years ago. It hangs over the whole movie.
It really does. Now, if the original was groundbreaking for aerial filming back in the 80s, Maverick aimed to just blow that completely out of the water using modern tech.
And it took a while to get here, right? Long development time.
Oh, yeah. Sources say 8 years in development, then 2 years of actual production. And then it got delayed 5 times because of the pandemic. Finally came out May 2022. Big budget too, $170 million.
And a lot of that budget went into making the flying look real, didn't it? Cruise was really insistent on practical effects.
Absolutely adamant. Minimize CGI, film the actors in real jets as much as humanly possible. That was the mandate.
Which led to the, what did the cast call it? The Tom Cruise school.
Yeah, of being a badass.
Nah.
Yeah. Cruise personally designed this intense, months-long flight training program that all the actors playing pilots had to go through before they even got near an FA-18.
What did that involve? Just jumping straight into a fighter?
No, much smarter than that. It was progressive. They started in smaller planes like Cessna 172s just to get basic spatial awareness. Then they moved up to an Ector 300, which is an aerobatic plane, so they could start experiencing some G-forces, loops, rolls.
Getting their bodies used to it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Then they graduated to L-39 Albatross jets. Those are actual military trainer jets. Higher speeds, more Gs.
And then the Super Hornets.
Only then, after months of building up tolerance and skill, were they ready for the FA-18 Super Hornets, where the actual filming would happen.
So the goal wasn't just to survive the flight.
No, the goal was for them to be able to act while pulling serious Gs. Deliver lines, operate cameras in the cockpit, react convincingly, all while their bodies are under incredible stress. They wanted, as the filmmakers put it, full scenes up in the air.
That sounds incredibly difficult to direct. How did Joseph Kosinski handle that? He couldn't exactly be in the back seat giving notes.
Right. His process was really unique. He explained how he'd spend hours on the ground beforehand, planning the shots, setting up these special IMAX quality cameras inside the cockpits, like 6 of them per jet.
Okay.
Then the jets would go up, actors and Navy pilots, and the actors were basically on their own for hours, trying to hit their marks, do the scene, manage the cameras.
All pulling Gs.
All pulling Gs. Then they'd land. Kosinski would immediately run over. They'd pull the footage right there on the tarmac, review it together. He'd give notes.
And then they go back up and do it again?
Exactly. Kosinski called it very tedious. Said they'd often fly for hours and only get maybe a minute or two of good stuff each day. But he said it was the only way to get that kind of authentic footage.
You can see it on screen. It looks incredible. Were the FA-18s as expensive to rent as the F-14s were back in the day?
Still pricey. The sources give a figure of over $11,000 per hour, $11,374 per flight hour for those Super Hornets.
Still a hefty price tag for realism. Now, they pushed practical effects, but there was still CGI, right? It wasn't all real.
Oh, definitely. It's important to clarify that. While the actors were in the back seats really experiencing the forces, the actual flying, the super complex, dangerous maneuvers was done by the expert Navy pilots in the front seats.
And they just edited the pilots out later.
Yeah, use CGI to digitally remove the pilots from the front seat in the final shots. That's standard practice for this kind of filming.
And wasn't there one specific shot that got called out as definitely CGI?
Yeah, sources mentioned a former FA-18 pilot analyzed the film and pointed one out. It's that scene where Maverick seems to fly his jet really close between two other jets during a training run.
Looked cool, but maybe too cool.
Exactly. The pilot explained that flying that close together is way too dangerous in real life, violates safety protocols. So that specific moment had to be digital trickery, despite the film's overall commitment to practical effects.
Good to know. What about the cameras they used? Anything special there?
They shot on Sony Venus cameras, which are top-of-the-line cinema cameras known for handling high contrast and detail, which you'd absolutely need for those cockpit shots with bright skies outside and darker interiors.
Makes sense. Okay, let's talk characters again. Val Kilmer returning as Iceman. That was huge. And pretty emotional given his health.
Incredibly moving.
Yeah.
And sources emphasize how much Tom Cruise wanted him back, how he insisted Kilmer be part of the sequel despite his health issues, especially the difficulty speaking after his battle with throat cancer.
And they found a way for him to have lines.
They did, using technology. An AI voice synthesis company worked with Kilmer. They fed hours of his old recordings, his pre-cancer voice, into an AI model.
And the AI learned to talk like him.
Essentially, yeah.
Yeah.
It created a clone of his original voice. So they could type in his lines for the movie, and the AI would generate the dialogue sounding like classic Val Kilmer.
That's amazing. A really thoughtful use of technology.
It really is. And his character's arc, going from Maverick's rival to this respected admiral who's basically Maverick's guardian angel in the Navy, it felt earned.
And Iceman's passing later in the film.
Yeah, handled very respectfully, a poignant moment. And sources note it felt like a nod to Kilmer's own real-life fight, done with sensitivity, even the credits just calling him Ice. Nice touch.
Really was. What about casting Rooster? Big shoes to fill, playing Goose's son.
For sure. Miles Teller won the role, apparently after doing a chemistry read with Cruise that really clicked. Sources say he beat out some other well-known actors.
Like who?
Glenn Powell was apparently in the running, and he ended up getting cast as Hangman, the new rival pilot, which worked out great. Nicholas Hoult was also considered.
Interesting. And Jennifer Connelly's character, Penny Benjamin.
Oh,
She wasn't totally new, right? There was a connection to the first film.
That's right. A deep-cut Easter egg. Penny Benjamin is the Admiral's daughter that Goose briefly mentions in the original Top Gun when he's listing off Maverick's past troublemaking incidents.
Oh, way. I totally missed that.
There's a quick line in the first movie, easy to miss. But yeah, they brought back that unnamed mention from 36 years ago and built a whole character around her for the sequel. Pretty clever writing.
That is clever. And the sequel is full of those kinds of nods, isn't it? Easter eggs referencing the original.
Oh yeah, packed with them. It leans into the nostalgia hard, but usually in a way that serves the new story too.
Like the opening sequence.
Exactly. It's almost a shot-for-shot remake of the '86 opening. Same font for the titles, starts with the Faltermeyer theme, then kicks into Danger Zone, even uses the old Don Simpson, Jerry Bruckheimer production logo.
Yeah.
Instantly tells you you're home.
And Maverick himself, he hasn't changed that much. Still got the jacket, the glasses.
The aviators, the bomber jacket with the patches, the Kawasaki Ninja motorcycle. It's all still there.
And still riding the bike without a helmet, right?
Huh. Yep. Sources make sure to point that out. Still speeding helmetless down the road. Some things never change. Shows that rebellious streak is still alive and well.
What about the bar scene? There was a parallel there, too, wasn't there?
Yeah, a nice remix of the original. In '86, Maverick hits on Charlie in the bar, not knowing she's his instructor, leading to embarrassment the next day.
Right.
In Maverick, the recruits are the ones who encounter Maverick in Penny's bar. They end up throwing him out because he can't pay his tab, having no idea this older guy is the legend about to train them. Same trope, bar encounter, classroom reveal, but flips the dynamic.
Nice. And he's still breaking rules, like the hard deck.
Oh yeah, that low altitude limit he kept violating in the first film, he does it again in the sequel.
Just being Maverick.
Well, this time it's tactical. The mission requires flying incredibly low. So Maverick deliberately breaks the 500-foot hard deck during training, takes it down to 300 feet to show the trainees, look, this impossible thing, it can be done. I just did it.
Yeah. Using his rule breaking for a purpose this time?
Kind of, yeah. And the dialogue echoes too. That line, don't think, just do.
That's from the sequel.
Yeah, but it's a direct callback to the original, where Maverick told Charlie, you don't have time to think up there. If you think, you're dead. It's his whole philosophy.
And doesn't Rooster use that line later?
He does. Right at a critical moment, when they're shot down, Rooster yells, don't think, just do, to get Maverick moving. It brings that whole theme full circle, with Goose's son embracing Maverick's instinctual approach to survive. Beautiful bit of writing.
Yeah, that was powerful. And the F-14, they actually get back in an F-14 at the end.
The ultimate callback. Stealing that old Tomcat from the enemy base, and Maverick even gets the line, "I shot down 3 MiGs in one of these things." Direct reference to the end of the first movie.
Perfect fan service. Was there some detail about the F-14 controls being wrong, though?
Yeah, a minor nitpick the sources mention. The movie shows the F-14 having, like, one magic button to switch between missiles and guns instantly. Apparently, the real jet's controls aren't quite that simple. But, hey, dramatic license.
Fair enough. So how was Maverick received overall? Huge success, right?
Off-the-charts success. Critically acclaimed, massive global box office hit in 2022. And it even got a Best Picture nomination at the Oscars, which is pretty rare for a sequel like this.
Wow. And how did people compare it to the original? Was it seen as better?
That's the interesting thing. The sources suggest a lot of critics and even audiences felt that, technically speaking, Maverick might actually be the better movie.
Really? In what way?
Mostly the aerial combat sequences. People were just blown away. The sources use phrases like technically breathtaking, best air combat ever put to screen.
Yeah.
That blend of real actors, real G-forces, and cutting-edge filming just created something people hadn't seen before.
But people still love the original, obviously.
Oh, absolutely. The sources acknowledge that debate. For many, the original Top Gun has that untouchable nostalgia factor, the 80s vibe, the soundtrack, the original story's charm. They might agree Maverick is technically superior, maybe has a tighter mission plot, but the 86 film just holds that special place.
It's got that unique energy.
Exactly. But Maverick is also praised for maybe handling the bravado and the danger of naval aviation with a bit more nuance this time around, revisiting themes with more maturity while still keeping it incredibly cool.
And what about recruitment? Did Maverick cause another bump for the Navy?
Too early to tell, according to the sources. It usually takes years to see that kind of impact. Plus, the Navy's facing different challenges now in the 2020s, even offering big bonuses to recruits. So, whether Maverick has the same kind of inspirational effect, we'll have to wait and see.
Okay, fascinating stuff on both films. Let's maybe circle back quickly to some of the key creative people behind the scenes. Tony Scott, directing the original.
Right. We mentioned he wasn't the only choice. Carpenter and Cronenberg were considered. But Scott brought that distinct, slick visual style from his commercial work and his commitment, like paying that $25K for the carrier shot.
Shows his dedication. And he struggled initially with filming the actors in the air because they kept getting sick, right?
Yeah, that was a major hurdle back then, something Maverick specifically addressed with all that pre-training.
And Joseph Kosinski, who directed Maverick, he had a relevant background, didn't he?
He did. Sources note he studied aerospace engineering before film school. Seems like pretty perfect preparation for this movie.
You'd think so. And he clearly stuck with it, calling it a tough one to make. That whole process of directing pilots remotely, reviewing footage on the tarmac.
So demanding. But necessary, he said, to get those authentic shots of actors genuinely reacting to the flight. Tedious, but worth it for the final result.
What about the music composers? Harold Faltermeyer for the original.
Created that unforgettable Top Gun anthem, just iconic. And sources point out how the composers for Maverick, Hans Zimmer, and Lorne Balfe smartly wove Faltermeyer's themes into the new score, like using that specific musical interval, the perfect fifth from the start of the anthem, to signal heroism.
Nice touch. And Giorgio Moroder's role in the original soundtrack? Huge.
Massive. Producer, co-writer of Danger Zone and Take My Breath Away. And his whole process with Take My Breath Away using Cherry Nunn's demo vocal.
Yeah, leading to that whole complex situation for the band, Berlin, shows the intricate, sometimes messy reality behind making movie music.
And finally, John Crawford from Berlin. His perspective is just so raw and interesting.
Talking about the hit song he didn't write?
Exactly. Yeah. That feeling of the band's biggest success being tied to something he felt creatively disconnected from. His honesty about ego and the unpredictable nature of hits is really compelling.
And comparing that expensive song he hated to the cheap demo he loved.
Yeah, it says a lot about where artistic satisfaction really comes from. Not always the big budget, high profile stuff.
And he had thoughts on the music industry now, compared to the 80s.
He did. Sources quote him saying the industry feels more fear-based now, less willing to take risks than back when Top Gun came out, when artists were maybe pushed more to evolve. He sees more creativity happening now with kids using technology online outside the traditional system.
That's a really interesting point. Maverick pushed filmmaking tech forward, while the music industry, which was so key to the original, maybe became more cautious.
It's a fascinating contrast, definitely food for thought about how different creative fields evolve.
And that's a wrap on our high-altitude dive into Top Gun and Top Gun Maverick.
We felt the need
Uh,
for analysis.
Whether you're here for the dogfights, the power ballads, or just the call signs, these films still leave a sonic boom on pop culture.
They really do.
Follow Roll Credits for more behind-the-scenes stories and fun facts, and we'll catch you next time. Until then, talk to me, Goose.